Here we are making history with Shirley Bond, somebody who needs no introduction. And my name is Scott McQualter. I'm with my co-host David Mothis. You're listening to or watching Crazy Damn Canadians. Welcome, Shirley.
Well, thank you very much. I think. I think.
Dave, kick things off here. What do you want to know? What do you want the listeners and the viewers to know about Shirley Bond?
Well, I think the first thing we were going to do is get a really hard statement out of the way and acknowledge that our entire lives, every time we've ever seen you, has been with Bill right over your shoulder. Mm-hmm. He's always been with us, and he passed away this year, and we know that that's probably the single biggest thing that's happened in your life, and we wanted to acknowledge that it's definitely for us too. We recognize that he was a big part of your life, and we miss him too, and we're sad that he can't be here when we get to hopefully change how people perceive Canadians and see Canadians, the unsung heroes in this country. So I think the first question we were going to ask you was probably the hardest question we're going to ask you, because a lot of people would find this awkward. It's your biggest screw up in life. And what did you learn from it?
Well, I think that from my perspective, because of the job that I have, the world that I live in as a person in public office, there are lots of those examples, I can assure you. But, I think that providing the wrong answer in important interviews and realizing that you have to find a way to back up and just be honest about that. So I've had a few of those experiences in my life where, you think you're fully prepared and you're ready to go, and what you intended to say doesn't come out the way you think the way it should have. So I would say there's a few public gaffes that I look back on now, and I think that I probably could have done a better job of those.
I think you're probably lucky that nobody watches Canadian politics, though. So it's just
that's true.
It's just you and your competitors.
Exactly.
We were actually just reading online before you arrived here, Shirley, and it was, correct us if we're wrong, year 2001 when you entered provincial politics in Victoria. And next year would be the 20th anniversary. If you could have a conversation with the 2001 version of Shirley Bond today, what advice would you give that person?
I think that I would still encourage her to run for public office. I think that despite the ups and downs and the difficulties, there have been exhilarating moments. The opportunity to work on projects like a medical program in northern BC and all of the things, a cancer center in the north. I would say to her, you know what? It may feel tough on some days, but I can assure you it is worth it. And it is worth taking the risk and the opportunity to be in public office. So, I would also remind her that there's going to be some days when the job hurts, when it's personal and painful. But in the end of the day, I would tell her it's worth it. And I honestly believe that today, almost 20 years later.
What's funny is, that's something that I've observed when people talk about any political figure or even anyone that's just recognized within the community, and they talk about them being something other. You're a politician, so now you're something other. You're part of that other, and you're some different person. And that was hopefully the point of this whole podcast, was to kind of get the more shoulders back. You're a real human being. I've had conversations with you on social media where you were like, holy heck, what the hell is going on? And it was very human to me. And what that did is it made me say, oh, this is a real person who's reacting to people being really mean. And she does care about it. But then I reflected upon the fact that if you went on global news and said, I really cared about that, it hurt my feelings, the only thing you'd be doing is opening yourself up to be perceived as weak or get attacked. And so I was hoping at some point, hopefully in this conversation, to get some of those kind of things that frustrate you or make you really happy out of those experiences that you've had, right? So let your shoulders go, because that's probably the most critical thing. Is one of the joke questions is, what's your favorite conspiracy about you?
That's a very good question. Probably that I have ulterior motives in the work that I do, and somehow I got extra help to get the job that I have now. We know that's not true. We know that it's about hard work. It's about being authentic. I care about that a great deal. I think that you're so right about how people view politicians. I think the word. Obviously, people react to it, and they forget that there's actually a person behind that word, somebody who cares about her family, somebody that loves the community that she lives in. And I have been very careful in my life not to feel sorry for myself when those hard days come. I mean, I am privileged to do the job I get to do. Yeah, of course there's tough days, and there's days when I ask myself, what on earth have I gotten myself into? But, from my perspective, I am who I am, and I love where we live, and that's, if anybody looks at what I can be faulted for, it's being playing favorites. I love where I live, and as a minister, I had to really grapple with can you be a homer? And the answer was, yeah, I am a homer, and I'm going to continue to be. So from that perspective, but interesting job, and I think the title itself brings an immediate reaction, which is often very inaccurate.
Well, I've got friends that imply you're part of the global elite.
Well, that would be news to me, I can assure you. So that's hilarious. I certainly am not, and that's actually quite funny.
But that's a very real thing.
Yeah.
As soon as you hit any level of authority, there is a significant portion of this population behind their keyboards implying that there is a global elite, and you are now the interim leader of the Liberal Party. You must be part of this other thing controlling and pulling the strings. You're Shirley from up the road who's got kids that live here and grandkids. And so if there's a global elite, that's it. That's what people are missing at the whole nation level.
Well, let's put an end to that rumor. Certainly I'm not.
Definitively.
And
okay.
Yes, absolutely not. I can put that rumor to rest. But, I think people do, lose that sense of who the person is. And, I've always worked really hard in this community, I think, to try to remind people that, I was born here. I love this place. And that I care enormously about how people view our city, how people view the people who live here, and the kind of community that this is. And, I think one of the big myths is that, politicians, for example, they have, this luxurious life. I want you to know it's not like that. It's usually really early mornings, and you're getting on planes and you're flying across the province. Obviously not so much now during COVID, but it's a lot of hard work. And but I think you're right. I think people think that suddenly you've moved into a new class of living, and that's certainly not true in my case. And for the vast majority of politicians that I work with, that is not true.
Yeah.
You actually see that a lot on a municipal level as well. When somebody could have something go wrong in their day in Prince George, they could hit a pothole on the way to work, and all of a sudden they're cursing city council, right? And you always hear the argument if there's an overspend or something where it's like we need to replace all of our city councilors. It's like, no, we actually have some really qualified people in these roles, and it's not like there was a huge lineup of individuals just putting their name forward to try to get in to city council. So it's nice to move away from these generalizations and to humanize these positions and these individuals, to recognize we're all human beings. We're all just trying to get through this crazy thing called life.
I want to acknowledge that one of the things Scott asked me in our first episode was just me and Scott talking about what we wanted to do. And one of the questions he asked me was, who's my favorite person in Prince George? And I scooped you. Because he said, "Oh, damn, you picked Shirley." And I said, what you'll see if you do watch that episode was talked about the fact that we went to church together when I was a little kid, and she was just part of the church world adults. And I guess as a little kid, you're like, "Oh, that's icky. They're all like just going to stop me from terrorizing anything." It's not like there was a relationship then. It was just a respect as one of the parents in church. And then I met you and saw you started doing events, which I think we'll ask the next thing. But I want to say one of the things that struck me as being really profound about you as a person was I started getting cards from you. Anytime I did anything kind of unusual or exceptional, I'd receive a card. And I thought, well, she knows me from church. This must be just Mrs. Bond being nice to me. But it really meant something to me until other people started mentioning I got a card from Shirley. Mm-hmm. And I thought to myself, that's not someone who's trying to get elected, because nobody knows that. When they talk about doing stuff quietly behind the scenes, I want to say that mattered a lot to me. Every single one of those mattered a lot to me as a person. I was like, that's someone who really cares. And that made me a staunch ally, whether I'm a Liberal or NDP. I said, I don't vote for a political party. Mm-hmm. I vote for a Shirley. And I think a lot of people do that in this community. I think you supersede, is that the right word? Politics with a lot of this community, and that's what I kind of hope we can make people understand, is that there's certain people who just care about community.
You know, I think that's true, and I was very lucky because I learned about the importance of, you know, handwriting and sending personal notes is not a thing that a lot of people do anymore. And while I love the convenience of technology, and I do, I have our daughter and her husband live in Australia, and I am, as you can imagine at this time in our lives, very, very grateful for technology. Otherwise, we would have so few ways to connect. But, you know, my mom and dad were incredible people, and my mom in particular was so fantastic at acknowledging people. And I think about the times in my life where something meaningful has happened, and it's usually accompanied by a note. You know, just the other day, I got a note from someone who doesn't live in Prince George, and it was just the most touching thing. It was, I've been thinking about you today, and over the last number of days as you've gone on this personal journey recently, and I just wanted you to know that I was thinking about you. And honestly, it was... it just touches your heart. And so for me, acknowledgement is such a huge, it's such an important thing in the day and age we live in, you know, that sense that I know who you are and I know what you've done, and it's a good thing. And so for me, that's really something that I take very seriously. I try to write some every week, just to, you know, to people who have done something special, and I know it's meant the world to me, so I'm really grateful to be able to do that for other people. And it's really funny because I'll be walking down the street and someone will stop me and say, I'm so glad you sent my grandson a note. Yeah. And I'm trying to think of, okay, how many grandsons did I send a note over the last few months? Because I really care about, you know, being connected to those cards. But, you know, it has been something that I think over my career, I hope that people recognize that it's a personal choice to acknowledge and to be kind and to let people know that they're cared about.
And just that simple step of writing a handwritten note to somebody, you mentioned the word acknowledgement, but that's synonymous with appreciation. Mm-hmm. And when people feel appreciated, they're injected with inspiration. They want to do more. They want to do bigger things. And so I feel like that's very important. And while on the subject of appreciation, there's a reason why I'm wearing this Terry Fox shirt. It's because Team Bond has been regulars at the Terry Fox run since I was just a little guy. And then when I took over the lead organizer role, I kind of saw to an even greater degree of how your family impacted that event every year. So I'm going to steal one of Dave's questions that we talked about before, since we are talking about charities. What are a few of your favorite annual charitable events in Prince George, or just, you know, some charities that you really, really have a deep respect for?
Mm-hmm.
I said it as, which charities have made you cry?
Ooh, that's
See,
better.
He doesn't hit the hard-hitting question, but which ones do you cry about?
Yeah. I think that, first of all, Terry Fox, you know, that run means the world to me because I can't watch the images of Terry on his run without being just filled with emotion. You know, we get up in the morning and we complain about the weather, or we don't feel like doing something. You know, this is an incredible human being that when you think about the gait, you know, the way he ran down the highway on those mornings, I am so deeply touched by that. It is incredible. And so for me, obviously, participating in that run, that walk for our family has been enormously meaningful. And I just think that, Terry Fox should inspire all of us every single day when we're feeling down, or I can't do this or I can't do that. And so I think that's important. I'm very touched by people who are impacted by Alzheimer's. I think that, watching the struggle of a person losing the knowledge of their families and others. And I've watched families that are just so deeply lost and hurt by the fact that, their mom doesn't know who they are anymore. And so I care about that a great deal. And then, of course, for me, from a very personal perspective, heart and stroke matters enormously to me. As you can imagine, Bill faced his first open heart surgery, and we got the kind of support we required to have additional years of life together. And it's amazing. He was healthy and well and incredibly blessed. And then, ironically, it was a massive stroke that took my husband's life, and that was a complete shock to me. We were preparing for a second heart surgery, and then I lost Bill to a massive brain stroke. And it was ironic because we had been enormous supporters of heart and stroke all of our lives. And then to find out that in the end of the day, it was a stroke that was ultimately responsible for Bill's death. So I will always be very, very connected. I am passionate about placing defibrillators in public spaces. Bill cared about that a great deal. That can be the difference between life and death. And I'm going to continue to work, and people have been very generous in supporting a legacy fund set up for Bill. And we're going to be able to place a lot of defibrillators in Prince George and throughout the Robson Valley. So, those will be those are certainly the ones who are, that are closest to me and certainly make me feel emotional. But I can tell you that every weekend when we're not in a COVID world, there are amazing events in this community. It's one of the privileges that I think I have. Some people see it as work. I see it as an honor to be asked to go and support whatever organization it is. I don't see that as my job. I see that as an honor, the chance to be able to support families that are going through difficult circumstances and to celebrate and to share and to support. All of those things mean the world to me. So I can't wait for us to get past COVID so we can get back to caring and reaching out and looking after one another in that way.
That's where we formed a lot of our relationship, was the fact that I was always at those events, but there was always a few people. There's a few people in Prince George that you always saw at those events. And you, me, and Lynn Hall would always be standing there.
That's true.
And chatting. And then when Todd Doherty got into it, he did a good job of showing up too.
And before that, Colin Kinsley, I can tell you, I can't tell you how many weekends I spent, Bill and I with people like Colin Kinsley, David Ma, incredible photographer. He and I literally followed each other around on the weekends, and we'd laugh because David would say to me, "So where are you going next?" It was like he was checking the agenda. And I love that about our community, though. And I hope that people who get the privilege of serving in public office see that as an honor, not as a duty. And that's certainly how I see it. And I know you DJ'd a lot of events that I was at, David, and I appreciate your contributions to our community in that way. Not only that, I think you DJ'd at my 50th birthday party, I recall. And we had the best time ever.
That was, Scott was going to ask me my favorite memory of you. And I was actually going to say you hired my DJ service to do your 50th birthday party. And
my husband did. It was a surprise, if you recall.
I went there prepared to do the most boring party you've ever been to. I expected people to sit there, eat some crumpets, sip some tea, and these people just let loose and danced.
It was the best night
so
ever.
Much fun. And I was so shocked. I was like, what just happened?
Where was the venue?
At Columbus Hall.
It was.
Nice.
It was absolutely incredible. And my family, it was a surprise.
And Bill didn't let it slip, or you didn't let it slip?
Not at all. David was amazing, and Bill was fantastic. And ironically, my son was in on it. And there was a hockey tournament in town that weekend. And he said, "Mom, it's fantastic. They'd love you to speak to their opening banquet. They want you to just come. We're a hockey family. Could you just arrange to do that?" And I said, "Sure, I'll find some time." So, you get yourself ready and you get out of the house, and then you walk in the room, and it was absolutely mind-boggling. There was all of our friends, and it was we danced the night away. It was so much fun, and I will never forget that. Those are the kinds of memories that just last a lifetime, and I'm so grateful to my family and my friends, and David made it a lot of fun for all of us.
So did he get that dance floor rocking then?
He did.
Name 3 songs you would have played at that party.
Well, guaranteed. If played 500 Miles, we would have played Old Time Rock and Roll. We would have played Shook Me All Night.
That's right. Because I know, and you know what? One thing that you're going to ask me is, what is something people don't really know about you? I love rock and roll, and David knows that I love AC/DC of all things, and so we found those songs, and David rocked the room for us, and I have never forgotten. It was the best birthday party ever.
In Prince George, AC/DC gets a dance floor pumping too.
Always has.
It gets it full, hey?
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because I remember a great story about I had a young man that was working for me, and we got in his vehicle to drive to a meeting one day, and the radio was just blasting, and an AC/DC song came on, and it was hilarious. We at the same moment we both reached for the volume dial, and we looked at one another, and he says, okay, I'm about to turn it down. I said, turn it down? What are you talking about? We need to turn it up. And I remember the look on his face. And so on our way to the meeting, we went and we were just blasting out tunes, but it was a moment I haven't forgotten. I remind him of that frequently.
Well, and that ties into the same theory that I thought that you're supposed to have a cup of tea and be super stuffy and not a real human and just say everything perfectly proper, and that's who you must be.
Well, it was, and I think that that people don't know the people behind the job often, and I hope that that people will take the opportunity to get to know people behind the job. It's easy to look at the title. And frankly, while I'm grateful for the opportunities that I've had, the title is way less important than the impact you can have in a community if you pour your heart and soul into something. So, for me, and I'm sure there are people who think, just another title isn't that great. But it's not like that for me. I'm always very, very humbled by the fact that I get to take on jobs. And, I love being with my family. I love being in this community. I love music. I love to, bake cookies and cupcakes at midnight for my kids and all the things that really matter to me. So I hope people know that it's not about the title. It's not about the job. It's about, who that person is.
Why do you think people keep electing you? Like, what do you think it is that the community sees in you that makes you get elected? Because I know, obviously, I don't know if you really know, because I know you messaged me before the election, and you were like, oh, I'm really worried about this election. I don't know if I've got this or not. And I literally commented, are you insane? I basically said, are you nuts? You're absolutely ridiculous. Right now, there's a 0% chance that you won't get elected. There's no chance. And she just kept going, I don't know. Yeah. Right now there's this wave. And I was like, you don't get it. Mm-hmm. Why don't you get it? What do you think it is about you that they do elect you for? Well,
first of all, I never, ever take it for granted. And I think that's an important part of who I am. And all you need to do is go and ask my team how I feel about, what those days are like. Usually it's 28 days. This time it was longer than that. And I drive hard every day because I never take for granted the fact that, this is an honor and it's an incredibly important role, but I never take it for granted. And I think if there's one thing I think that people will say about me, and it doesn't really matter where they are on the political spectrum, I hope, it's that I work hard. And, I think that matters a lot to people. And so you'll hear people say, oh, I'd never vote for her, but I know how hard she works.
Yeah.
And then people who do vote for me know that I'm gonna work on their behalf, and we're gonna work hard to move things forward. And mostly, a lot of it is about caring for individual people, like the stories that we face in our office. When we deal with families who are hurting and people who need help, and for me, I've always viewed the titles, the ministries, all those things important, but kind of the icing on the cake. The cake is really what you do at home. It's what you do to help families who need you and who walk into your office and say, we don't know where to go. What do we do? We've always tried to be more than just an MLA office. We consider ourselves a place where people can come and ask for help. And, we've found clothing for families in need. my amazing staff partner, Dorothy, has replaced a person's purse. When a woman had her purse stolen, she went out and found a new purse and filled it with all the things that, you'd want to have in those purses. I remember doing the Salvation Army kettle, and a lady came by to put, her money in the kettle, and she had no gloves on her hand. Dorothy took her gloves off and gave them to that woman. To me, that's what motivates me when I have staff that are that caring and loving. It really is about having big hearts and caring for people in a really personal way. And so we try to do that, and that's what motivates me every day.
Just one more touch point on that. And I appreciate that answer, and I like knowing that about you, and I've known that for a long time, but other people wouldn't, so we can't make the assumption. That's one of the challenges, is to get that information out. But I did also say in that message, I was having a conversation with my mother, and I said, because my mother was a teacher, so she was, of course, NDP because she was union and she wanted to make more money. But my mom said, I'm NDP, but Shirley Bond's the one person I would vote for that's not NDP. She goes, and I always said she was going to end up the leader of the Liberal Party. And I got into an argument. I got into an argument with my mom, and I said, no, Mom, I said that, and I actually messaged it to Shirley, and I screenshotted it saying, Shirley, what's next is you're the leader of the Liberal Party. Yeah. And Shirley was like, I think you said no.
It's exactly what I said. And until just very recently, I would have continued to say no. And, I want to just make the point that it is a temporary position. And, the great thing for me is that I get to work with a fantastic team of people. And ultimately, I will get to hand the reins over to the new permanent leader. And so I'll do my job in the short term.
I'm still calling it a win, though. I called
That's
it.
True. That's probably a pretty good guess.
So my new tagline is Dave Machus, political prophet.
Very prophetic, Dave.
Exactly.
So you've often been recognized, Shirley, as a fierce advocate for the North, and you're blessed to look after a region that includes the Robson Valley. Every time you go out there, you must be blown away by its beauty. Do you have conversations with a lot of people in Victoria or just down south in general that have never explored this area of the province? And how can we, not that now is the time to encourage people to be doing more traveling, but do you think COVID in a way has opened up people's eyes to the fact that we do live in paradise in British Columbia? It doesn't matter what part of the province you live in. You're lucky to live in British Columbia. Do you think maybe once COVID cases start going down and we can travel throughout the province again, that we're going to see a major uptick in Lower Mainland individuals exploring regions like Valemount and Northern BC?
Well, I certainly hope so. And, I can't wait for that to happen. Obviously, I've even had restricted travel within the constituency, and that's really hard. We live in a phenomenal part of British Columbia, and I love being the champion for this part of BC. When you think about it, we're home to the only inland temperate rainforest in the world. And, if people haven't been to the ancient forest, imagine what they're missing out. But I would find little, hidden gems along the way. And so I always remind people in Victoria when you think about, they don't know where we are on a map in many cases. Prince George, perhaps, but Crescent Spur and Dunster and Tejon and Valemount, McBride, these incredible places. Crescent Spur has some of the best heli-skiing in the world. And one of my favorite places, Bill and I loved it so very much, is called the Cranberry Marsh in Valemount, and a beautiful wildlife basically preserve that's in place, and it's phenomenal. You can go there in the fall, the spring, the winter it freezes and people skate on it. It's just... it is an incredible place. So I will always be a champion and an advocate. I think that far too many British Columbians look elsewhere, and where they should look is closer to home. And hopefully that's one of the positive things that comes out of COVID, is that we look a little bit more in our backyard instead of thinking about where else we need to go.
I've traveled. That's a big part of my life, was travel around the world. And COVID hit. I bought a motorhome, and I spent this entire summer. I've lived right beside Wells Gray Provincial Park, probably one of the most beautiful parks on the planet. Had never been there. And I said that to friends. They're like, you go to Hawaii, but you haven't been to Wells Gray? I went there, and it blew my mind. Wells Gray Provincial Park convinced me to lose 45 pounds. It was hiking in that park and realizing that I couldn't do it at the level I wanted. And I said, I got to change my life. That park was the tipping point for me to say, I'm going home and changing my whole life, because it was so beautiful and I was frustrated that I couldn't do it.
Isn't it strange how pre-COVID, it almost felt like to actually go on vacation, you had to leave the province of British Columbia, right?
Yeah, going to Vancouver was a weekend trip if you did that. Going to the Okanagan, same thing. And now all I'm thinking about next year is all these great locations, especially through the Robson Valley. It's ridiculous.
Absolutely incredible place. And you know, I was very lucky when, you know, having cabinet portfolios that required a lot of travel across the province. And I went to places that I had never been to. And I am embarrassed now that it took me that long to get there. You know, when I think about going to Nisga'a, for example, and who knew that they had lava beds in British Columbia? And when you go and see the stunning geography and the amazing culture of the people, and you know, the story of Nisga'a, and it's just, and why did the volcano erupt, and learning that from children there, it's extraordinary. And I think about the Kootenays, and you know, spending days there doing you know, basically my work, but coming away just thinking, wow, you know, we are so lucky. So I do hope, and I think there are going to be some constructive and positive things that come out as a result of you know, the pandemic. And I think we have to figure out what those are and celebrate them, because it's too easy to get caught in the negativity of where we find ourselves in the world. So I'm a huge fan of the Robson Valley, and it's not just the places, it's the people. They're resilient and they're hardworking, and you know, what David always teases me about, you know, worrying about, you know, being successful electorally. One of the things that causes me to be very sad when I think about elections is, what would happen if I didn't get to go back and visit this incredible group of people in the Robson Valley? I care about them very much. I know many of them by name. I know what they do. I know where they live. You know, I have a couple in the Robson Valley, and their names are Ray and Lou, and it is part of, you know, what the Robson Valley means for me. They're an older couple that have a farm, and we go and we have coffee, and Lou always bakes, and we sit around their table, and I get grilled like there is no tomorrow. Like, what did you do that for? Why do you say that? How come you haven't done this? But I love those people, and I love the fact that we can pull up in their driveway, the coffee pot goes on, you know, the bacon comes out, and we sit around what is essentially a farm table and have those conversations. You know, I would never have met those people if it wasn't for the job that I have, but I will never forget them. I care about that part of, you know, the Dunster, you know, when you think about Dunster, the bridge, the painted bridge, how many people in British Columbia have seen the flowers painted on the bridge, or been to the Dunster Ice Cream Social? One of my favorite events in the entire world. It's amazing. Once a year, the Dunster Ice Cream Social, where everyone from the Robson Valley and a lot of people from Prince George come together. They celebrate with music and ice cream, and it's just so special. And so I love the riding I get to represent, and no matter what happens in my future in terms of an electoral future, I will always be deeply connected to these people and these places.
Dunster, I DJ'd there a few times.
At the Dunster Hall?
I did a community party in the Dunster Hall, and I remember walking in and everybody was 75 years old. Like, that's all I thought in my head. I was like, man, this is a 75-year-old room. I'm going to be out of here by 11. I actually had messaged home and said, I'll be out of here by 11 because there's no way this... 4 a.m. Yeah. Nobody left. It was 4 a.m. when I got out of the Dunster Hall with 75-year-olds just doing the butterfly and polkas over that they'd already done because I had such a limited collection that they needed there. That's Dunster.
You know what? And you know, the incredible thing, the other side of it is the artisans and the artists and the musicians and the, you know, all of the people who make the Robson Valley home. You know, the music festival, the Robson Valley Music Festival, one of the most amazing and beautiful small museums in the province is in McBride, and people worked very hard to put that in place. The collections are incredible there. So, you know, it's to me, it's not about the size of the community you live in. It's about the experiences and the commitment that people have in those communities. So some of the best things that I have had an opportunity to do in my life have happened in the Robson Valley, and Billy and I loved our Robson Valley road trips.
And McBride has to be one of the most underrated communities in the province in terms of just beauty and access to the outdoors. When you're in McBride, when you're looking at snowshoeing, cross-country skiing, hiking, snowmobiling.
Snowmobiling is one of the top spots in the world.
And within minutes, you're in world-class terrain.
So let's give you a tough question. Let's just flip right around now. Give you another tough one. Scott didn't even want to ask this question, but I was like, no, we can ask this because she can just fib it if she wants. If you could change anything about Prince George, you just get to change one thing. You could snap your fingers and it changes. What's the one thing you would change about Prince George if you could?
Well, I think it would be less about Prince George. It would be more about how people think about Prince George. I want you to know that it is hurtful to me personally. I remember when some Vancouver, media people decided when Elton John was going to do his concert here, they went out of their way to call Prince George, like the armpit of the province, and how fast can you fly in for a concert, and can I get out the same night? And I remember feeling angry, like not just annoyed, but angry. And I think I eventually called up that radio station and we had a little interview, and I think Mayor Hall did exactly the same thing. So what I would change is less about who we are and where we live. And obviously there are some things in our community that we want to improve on, for the quality of life for everyone who lives here. But I can tell you that what I worry about more, and what really upsets me, is how people view the place that we live. I love this place, and there's things that we need to work on. There always is, but it's how people perceive where we live. That we're in the middle of nowhere and we have no amenities, and why on earth would I want to go there? And I keep thinking to myself, why on earth wouldn't you want to go there? You can raise a family, you can be outdoors, you can travel to some of the most spectacular places in our province within hours, if not minutes in many cases. So what I would love to see change is people's views of who we are and what this city represents. And I think it's getting better, and there's always a concentrated effort to try to make it better. People in elected office talk about it, and we have champions like both of you and others. But there's still that lingering perception that somehow it's not a great place.
But you're right, it is changing, though. Mm-hmm. That was the whole point of creating Hell Yeah, Prince George. Mm-hmm. It was that same frustration saying, why are people negative about this place? And the recognition that you can have a regular job and afford a home here. And it took COVID for everyone to realize how nice it is that it's far away from everything. When all of a sudden we went, that's great. When everybody else is really locked up, you can still go to the Tabor Trails here or Eskers or anywhere within minutes of town. Everyone has their area. And so now I think we're getting that freedom. Now you've got tons of people from Vancouver buying homes here and second homes and moving back within my own network. I think that's shifting. I think that a critical thing would be, you don't want too many people coming, but we definitely want people coming. You don't want to be over capacity and then straining your resources. But at the same time, I think we are getting that shift.
Well, I think we're starting to see it, and I think that's fantastic. And what matters to me, when I stop and think about it, my son and daughter-in-law can choose to live here, can have a lovely property in Beaverley, and they can have goats and horses and dogs, which they do. They can raise Caleb and Cooper to be outside and to attend a great school, community type school, and that is a fantastic opportunity for young families today. And so I think there's lots of opportunity. I think the way that our community cares for one another, you two know it better than anyone. We have a spirit of generosity that is unprecedented. And if I were asked, what do you like most? I like the fact that people step up. All you have to do is give them an opportunity. And guess what? Time and time and time again, we've seen people like the two of you in this room, ask, we need help, or there's a family, or could we do this, or can we do that? I watched Remembrance Day recently, where David does a post about the Legion needs help. And, within hours of one day, we're in the $5,000 range or whatever. I'm sure it's gone up by now. But to me, that's the spirit of this community. And I love that. And I am so proud of it. I don't think a lot of other communities are like that. I don't know, because I love this one and I live here. But boy, I'm proud of that.
I think hear that often.
I think if other people, or especially people in this community, got a taste of what other communities and cities are like, that's when they're going to realize how special Prince George is, because the kindness level of our community residents, like you said, unprecedented. And so I agree with you, Shirley, when it really hurts when you see, or you speak with people from the Lower Mainland and they might not have the best things to say about Prince George. What infuriates me is when people actually choose to call this community home and live in Prince George, perpetually slam it. Because when I moved back here from Vancouver, it just felt like we were our own worst critic in a lot of ways. And it took me to the opportunity of living in another city and doing some traveling, especially third world countries, to all of a sudden realize we have it good in Prince George. We are really blessed to call this city home. And I actually had a student worker who came here from Vancouver, and speaking about misperceptions, before she even arrived at UMBC, she didn't know if our roads were paved in Prince George. She literally asked her parents, like, are there roads paved there?
Yeah, and I mean, I think the thing that I think, though, is so incredibly important is you can talk to so many people who came for a year and stayed for a lifetime.
Yeah.
And I think that's really what the attraction of our community is. If they take the opportunity to come and visit and to be here, often it gets a grip on your heart. And people who came for a short period of time have ended up, staying for long periods of time. And when they leave, they take a piece of Prince George with them. In my job, one of the things that it just amazed me is that it seemed that wherever I went, I met someone who had either been to Prince George or had spent time here or who had lived here, or my family grew up there, or whatever it happens to be. And it's just amazing. There's this network of people from Prince George who populate the world. And literally, Billy and I would meet people in other countries, and we'd hear, I can remember being on a sidewalk in London coming out of a theater one night, and someone said, "Bill, is that you?" And it was extraordinary. It was someone who had known him when he went to school here in Prince George. So I think if you come and you experience and you get to know the people and love the outdoors, I do think there's a part of your heart that there's a bit of a grip on your heart once you get here.
And UMBC's been phenomenal with that, right? With over 14,000 graduates, and lots of them are just spread out throughout the world doing great things. Like, it's hard to imagine Prince George without a University of Northern British Columbia. It'd be impossible to have this community without it. Almost 30 years.
I think the tipping point, though, I think what changed in our community, we'd have to recognize that for all the bad that there is with social media, for all the frustrating components of social media, and the 1% people who are just toxic on it, it is the social media in Prince George, having everyone kind of connected on a few pages that are positive in nature, and sharing those stories has made people, because there was always that many good people in Prince George. There was always people doing community cleanups. There was always people donating to charities. We have a huge volume of charities that have always had fantastic support, but now we can see it. And you see so many of these actions, like that girl on social media the other day who opened her mailbox to $300 placed inside it with a card from Anonymous saying, "I know Christmas might be a little tighter." And that post blew up on social media in Prince George. That happens every day. Now we know, sure, there's some bad news about a crime rate or about some gangs or whatever that may be happening in that year or that decade. But it's overwhelmed by those stories and cards from Shirley Bond and Todd Doherty showing up to help you, and Lynn Hall, and the fantastic people in Prince George vastly outnumber. And it took social media, I think, in a lot of ways for us to go, oh, damn, there's way more good people here than there is bad. Just the bad are so stinking vocal that, they scream so loud. But now we outnumber them.
And speaking about good people, we wanted to talk about mentorship. So Shirley, that's our next question. Can you talk about 3 people that have been mentors in your life, either now or at a young age or at the start of your political career? Just 3 mentors or very inspirational people that have helped guide you through the last few decades.
Well, let me start. It goes a way back, and I mean, I think about there was a woman in Prince George who was on the school board, and her name was Jean Kellett. And I can tell you, I was a high school kid who thought student council was pretty cool, and I liked that whole idea of being involved in leadership and stepping it up and finding ways to support the school. And Jean Kellett, I remember being invited to a school board meeting as a student rep, and I just stopped and thought about her, and I was, first of all, grateful that she was inclusive and said, let's bring some students in. Let's give them an opportunity to actually experience this. And I'm positive that she had a lasting impact. The fact that she was an example of how you could get engaged at an early age, and you could make a difference. Secondly, someone that David would know well, I mean, I have to tell you that I am so very fortunate to have been loved and cared for and mentored by Lance and Pat Morgan, who, aside from the fact that, they were pastors of a church, they were also deeply connected to my family. My kids called them Grandma Pat and Papa Lance. That's who they were. And they spoke to me about important values related to, where do you invest your time and how do you support your family and what are the kinds of things you need to do in the world. And Lance was and Pat were just those people who you knew sort of cared and loved you no matter what. And so for me, that was enormously important. And I guess I'm not sure that this counts as mentorship, but I don't think I could have a conversation about this unless I talked about my dad. He was an incredible human being, and he was small in stature, but enormous in heart. And when I think about, his influence in my life, when my dad was in the latter stages of his life, he asked me what I think is just an absolutely essential question. And he was, likely, and he did, die, during, not long after this. But he said to me, called me close and said, "Shirley, I need to know something." And I said, "What is that, Dad?" And he said, "Did I make a difference?" And I have never forgotten that moment because, it doesn't matter whether you are in elected office. In fact, you don't need to be. I think we need to ask ourselves every day, did I make a difference? Do I make a difference? And let me just share with you, how, as David pointed out at the top of the podcast, pretty difficult time in my life, to be honest. It's been an unbelievable journey for me and my family, unexpected. And you just sort of, you face what you face. I have been overwhelmed, just completely overwhelmed by the generosity, the kindness of complete strangers, of, this is where we live. People drop stuff on my front doorstep, and it continues today. Like, they have dropped, food and cards, and my neighbors, Dan and Cheryl, who, when I'm not there, the other day I came home and my driveway, thank goodness, had been snow blowed. A neighbor from down the road came over the other day and he said to me, I was outside shoveling, "Do you mind if I help you?" It was like, "No, please do." And so all those things make a difference. And so my dad, really influenced who I am. Did I make a difference? And I will never forget those words. And I think that I think about, as a person, did I make a difference? Obviously, I have a job where I'm supposed to make a difference, and I work hard at that. But, I'm now a widow, and I know the pain of that journey. I have a responsibility to care for others who find themselves in the same position that I'm in. So, am I going to make a difference? I certainly hope so. And I give my dad all the credit for that.
I think we should ask you one more question.
Sure.
And I think then we probably can say that I hope that people have a better idea of who you are as a human being. We'll ask one more question each. Think of a really good one.
All right.
Okay, my last question
Not too hard, you
something
guys.
I'm just curious about,
Yes.
and this is a simple answer. How many more years do you see yourself if you keep getting elected, which you would, member, political profit, you would keep getting elected. How many more years would you stay in politics in BC for? Would you go federal?
So I think that, and I get asked this a lot, because obviously I do believe that we need to, governments and elected office needs to reflect what British Columbia looks like. And I think we need to find ways to transition and to be inclusive and to be more diverse. And so, obviously I have a 4-year term ahead of me. I hopefully have a much shorter period of time as the interim leader, because we would hope to have a permanent leader in place, at some point in the not too distant future. But I also want to support and encourage young people to participate in this process. And I have been so privileged to serve in public office. So I'm fully aware of the need to make change and to embrace new ideas and welcome young people to public office. So, I am, I'm not making an announcement here today that, this is it for me, but I'm also really pragmatic about knowing that, there comes a time when we need to transition to a younger, more diverse set of elected officials. And so that's something that I'll be thinking about as I work my way through these next months as, in the new role I've been given. But I'm just so energized by some of the young people who are interested in political life and in public service. I prefer to call it public service because I look at these young people and I know that they're going to make a difference in the world. They are going to make a difference, and we have to pave the way for that to happen. So, I've been asked many times to consider running federally and doing all kinds of things, but one of the things that was important for me, people who serve at the federal level, who live in where we live, they sacrifice a lot when it comes to travel and, traveling across the country and all of those things. I believe that if you're going to represent where you live, you need to be able to get home to where you live. And I have done that virtually all of my career, traveling home, every week to be part of my community. That is very hard to do. And I give a lot of credit to people like Todd Doherty, who works really hard to come back and forth across the country. So I admit I personally was not prepared to take that amount of time traveling back and forth, doing those kinds of things, even though, service at that level would be exciting, I'm sure. I felt like the commute to Victoria and back was enough for me. And for my family, I really wanted to still be pivotal in the when it comes to connecting with my family. And so I have nothing but high regard and respect for people who choose to serve, especially from where we live, in federal office, because it takes even more time and effort and commitment, than it does for me to travel back and forth to Victoria.
So you heard it here. Her work limit is 1 hour and 27 minutes.
That's right.
One flight to Victoria. And then
that's right. Yeah. No, you know what? It's ironic. People used to criticize me for being on a plane and working nonstop because I would forget to look up and to visit with people, and and it's just you're so driven to be good at what you're supposed to be doing. So I would have head down doing notes. The really funny story is that people would say I always carry during this season. I always would carry a bag of Christmas cards with me, and I would literally write dozens of cards on the plane. Yeah. So I had to learn to just step back for a minute. And, when people are getting on the plane, talk to them, welcome them, they're likely looking at you. And so those things really make a difference. And so I'm still, I still work really, really hard. But I try to look up every now and again and, and acknowledge people.
Can you write Christmas cards simultaneously, one with your left hand, one with your right? Because that would be a skill.
Yeah, I know, but you know what? It's really interesting. I often, I always pray for really smooth flights, because I'd be writing, and the next thing you'd know, you'd get a very unusual signature on the Christmas card. But, again, it goes back to that personal connection. I'm a person who actually writes a note and personalizes those cards, because I think it speaks to, again, acknowledgement. It speaks to recognition that, yes, this will take a minute or two of my time, but I'm thinking about you when I do that. So a lot of people wouldn't know necessarily that I do that, but I write hundreds of cards throughout the year.
I think it's incredibly special. My older sister, Kirsty, who lives in Hawaii, same thing. She's never missed a birthday. Any of her siblings or nieces or nephews, handwritten card every time. Christmas. You even get like some holidays like Easter, she'll send out a card. It's incredible, because it's like becoming a lost art in a lot of ways. And a lot of kids these days, they don't even know how to handwrite. Right? Yeah. Is it not
That's
taught
true.
in the curriculum?
Look at the
anymore?
writing on this. You can't read
a lot
it.
of the kids these days, look at this guy.
You can't read it.
I can tell you, my daughter in Australia and her husband, they always tease me because, of course, we use technology, and I'm so thankful for the opportunity to Skype with her and Trevor, and it feels like I'm close to them, and that's really important, especially now. But I still insist in writing a birthday card and sending it to Australia, because there's just something, even though I can send one electronically, I do know how to do that. And there's just something about knowing that she has a piece of home and a piece of, something tangible that, so she always teases me. She says, Mom, there is such a thing as e-transfer. I said, I know about that, but I want to make sure that you still, I just a few weeks ago sent away a big box of treats to Australia, because I wanted her to know that, and have something tangible on Christmas morning. So, that's probably one of the quirky things that people won't know about me, but that really matters to me.
Well, I just read a book, the Matthew McConaughey, the actor, his biography. I love biographies, and he spent a year in Australia. So any listeners or people watching this, I challenge you to read Matthew McConaughey's book, and just even it's chapter 5 that he talks about his experience in Australia. It is one of the funniest, remarkable stories I've ever read. So sorry for the side note there, but great book. One other thing that I wanted to chat about is if you were to look at 3 inspiring Canadians that you've never met before, and it might be from decades ago, it might be present day Canadians, they don't have to be here with us anymore, but if you were just to think about 3 Canadians that you would love the opportunity just to sit down and have coffee with for 20 minutes, who would be at the top of that list?
Wow. Let me think about that. Well, first and foremost, I probably would put Terry Fox at the top of that list. I currently have the children's book that has been written, and I love that. The thought of hearing from him in terms of being inspirational. I think that I'd love to speak to Mary Ellen Smith, who was when you stop and think about it, the first female MLA who literally walked into the legislature and had to face the circumstances she faced and what that would be like for her. And we need to continue to make sure that we see more women in that circumstance. And I will tell you this, that somebody that I care about enormously, have had the pleasure of meeting him, but again, along the same lines, I think Rick Hansen is one of the most incredible human beings, and Williams Lake and all of that. And when I think about, I can still visualize, Rick in his wheelchair, attempting to make the climb on the Great Wall of China. I can still remember that moment and what it took, from a physical perspective, but also mentally and emotionally for him to that, the Man in Motion tour. And I still get emotional when I think about the extraordinary effort that took. And he is an incredible human being. He cares. He's written a children's book. so for me, it's that kind of person that inspires me to, when you get up in the morning and you think you've got something to complain about, you should probably think twice about that. So, those are people who I admire enormously, and I think all of us should take a page out of their book and learn from their examples.
We should get her to do us a favor and reach out to Rick Hansen's people and say, you've got to do this podcast.
I will do that for you. Actually,
Canadians.
Rick just sent me a text the other day.
I would just love that.
To be connected with me. And I remember being in a classroom with Rick on the first day of school one day. One year we went together to a classroom, and he read his I read the book because it was one of the books is called Rick Hansen, Canadian Hero or something, and Rick was decidedly uncomfortable. It was, he does not see himself in that way. He sees himself as, somebody who had a passion and had a dream. And in my office in Victoria, actually, I have a photograph that Rick gave me, and his motto is everything is possible, and that's what he kept reminding people of, but what I appreciate about him especially was he was uncomfortable with being called a hero. He just sees himself as a person with a passion and a mission, and that should tell you a lot about Rick Hansen's character.
And those are three incredible examples of inspiring Canadians, but you also look at the similarities that they have. They've all faced major obstacles, right? And those obstacles, in a lot of ways, have defined their trajectory in life, which has brought them to the people they became. Sometimes when you're facing those major roadblocks or hurdles in life, you have two options. You can let them defeat you, or you can give up, or you can take them head on and use it as an opportunity to provide inspiration for others and just keep on pushing forward. And all three of those Canadians exemplify that in spades.
I think that's a wrap.
Just like that. So Shirley, you are the first official guest on Crazy Damn Canadians, and we're just so excited for when you reach out to Rick Hansen being like, the guys were a little bit nerdy, but I had a good time.
Yeah.
I think it's a great idea, and I actually look forward to hearing stories of others from across our country. Our country, our province, our community is full of incredible people that should inspire and drive us to make a difference, in the words of my amazing dad. But thanks to both of you for being difference makers too, and I'm glad I was the test case here. So I look forward to the next podcast, and certainly will be a listener.